Hey, Ian, hope you're having a good Thursday, my friend.
Yeah, it's going well. Hope you are too.
Hey, yeah, man, today's a better day, for sure. Hey, buddy, let's start with Matt Rhule, of course, fired by the Panthers on Monday. Not a surprise, although some players were surprised. What are some of them saying about Rhule's departure?
Yeah, P.J. Walker, the quarterback who's probably going to start this week, said everybody was a little shocked. Walker might be a little more attached to Rhule, having played for him at Temple. So there's a connection there. But then followed that up, Walker, by saying, well, everybody had a feeling, and over the past couple of weeks, we came into each week not knowing. So I think that does certainly speak to one reason why this move was made now by the Panthers, just to end any possible uncertainty and, allowing the players to have an excuse, saying we don't know what the coaching situation is going to be. But it does sound like all of the players did like Matt Rhule, that he hadn't lost the locker room.
Right.
David Tepper said something about there being a lack of intensity in last Sunday's game. But from all accounts, and you saw this, I think, in their play on the field, that team didn't quit on Matt Rhule. That's not to say that Matt Rhule shouldn't have been fired. Obviously, he has not had success. He's not, whatever he's doing is not working. But usually you point to the fact that players have quit on a coach as the top reason to get rid of them. And judging by these comments, Christian McCaffrey also, stated his admiration, his like of Matt Rhule, Shaq Thompson. So that apparently wasn't the reason why Matt Rhule was dismissed.
Yeah, it's funny. I had read the same thing, that Rhule had not lost the locker room. So maybe the firing on Monday, yeah, we kind of expected it to happen. But when I read that, I'm like, well, maybe this will be delayed a couple of weeks. Speaking of Tepper, we segue into that. His presser was really weird. He went after a Charlotte Observer columnist, said that live music didn't exist in Charlotte before he arrived, and that the organization had not had a winning culture in years. Wow, that's a lot to take in one press conference. Do you think the fans are tiring of the Panthers owner?
Oh, I absolutely think the fans are getting tired of David Tepper. I mean, he keeps stepping in it, really, with his comments, and then you had, what happened in Rock Hill, backing out of that project. But Tepper, he doesn't win himself any favors he acts like he's smarter than everybody. And that press conference just absolutely reeked of that he hated being up there, having to answer for a move that he made, which is not something that he's probably accustomed to doing. And granted, he's been extremely successful in his business career, right? I mean, he wouldn't be in a position to be the Panthers owner if not for that. But his comments to Scott Fowler, the Charlotte Observer columnist, Fowler asked, when Tepper made this decision, did he make the decision after Sunday's game? Did he make it Monday morning? And Tepper just bristled at that. I think the idea being that, this is something he'd been looking at for weeks, maybe even months, even going back to last season. The live music comment, I don't know what the hell.
I know, dude. It's like...
I mean, what does that mean? I mean, I think people who have seen shows that, like the Fillmore or PNC Music Pavilion, the Spectrum Center are all like, well, wait a minute. I think I've seen live music in Charlotte before.
I mean, our band played a wedding in Charlotte back in like 2005 or 6. Does that gig not exist on the record? I mean, I have no idea, man.
Right. I mean, was he just talking about Elton John? I mean, okay, just say, Elton John did come to Charlotte before that, but just the arrogance that comes with that remark. We brought live music to Charlotte. We reopened restaurants that were ready to close with what we've done here, as if the entire city owes David Tepper for what he's done with the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers obviously were there before David Tepper bought them. Enormously popular, very successful NFL franchise. So you asked, are the fans losing patience with Tepper? I think absolutely they're turned off by his arrogance and his demeanor.
Yeah, that conference did him no favors whatsoever. He needs to do better. And by the way, when he says not a winning culture, he's responsible for the last 2.5 years of that non-winning culture as well. But you didn't hear him say that. It was only 7 years removed. The Panthers went to a Super Bowl in 2015, and there have been up and down years since then for sure. But, it's like, again, 2.5 years, it's been a losing culture as well. Who's he putting that on? Not himself, it appears. All right, so, Ian, Sean Payton is being listed as the top candidate for the job. We'll see about that. Who knows? But what other names are being tossed around as a potential replacement for Matt Rhule?
Yeah, Sean Payton's the home run hire, but as we've talked about it, and I'm sure you've mentioned, and the listeners know, this will be difficult. It would be difficult for the Panthers to get Sean Payton because they would have to most likely trade draft picks. So Payton is still under contract with the Saints as their head coach through 2024. And for the Saints, maybe the Saints would have let him go to the Miami Dolphins. You remember that was a rumored possibility. But to let him go within the division, the Panthers would have to get something up to get Sean Payton. Do they have those resources after making trades for Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield? Maybe not. So Sean Payton would be an outstanding hire, but yeah, maybe not so likely. Now, the interesting thing will be, do the Panthers want to go for a defensive guy or they want to go for an offensive guy? Because usually you want to go with the opposite of what you had before, right? And Matt Rhule built a great defense, but offense has been a huge problem. He went through 3 offensive coordinators. They've gone through, 3 or 4 quarterbacks. That's been a huge problem. Yet, almost all of the top candidates that appear to be available are defensive guys. Dan Quinn, the Cowboys defensive coordinator, figures to be a top candidate for several NFL jobs. Raheem Morris, the Rams defensive coordinator. Do the Panthers want to step in it and hire Brian Flores? The Steelers, he's their linebackers coach and defensive assistant, but currently suing the NFL. Although it should be pointed out, Steve Wilkes is also part of that lawsuit, and he's currently the interim coach for the Panthers. So maybe that's not an issue. Some offensive names, maybe. Oh, one more name, DeMeco Ryans. I've seen the 49ers defensive coordinator is also very well regarded and a possible pick there. But on the offensive side, Eric Bieniemy, the Chiefs offensive coordinator, it's hard to believe he hasn't gotten a head coaching job yet. Byron Leftwich, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offensive coordinator. And then one name that I've seen pop up is the Philadelphia Eagles offensive coordinator, Shane Steichen, who maybe isn't as well known right now. He was an assistant also with the Rams before going to the Eagles. But with how the Eagles have performed and the work he's done with Jalen Hurts, he figures to be a top candidate. But in going over all these names, I do wonder, is David Tepper going to go for somebody with head coaching experience? Because one of the phrases that he used in that press conference was he wants a leader of men, and then that's one reason why he likes Steve Wilkes. He's a leader of men. So is he going to go for somebody with head coaching experience? Or will Tepper he can't resist looking like the smartest guy in the room? That's why he hired Matt Rhule, and everybody was like, what are you thinking, hiring a college coach, giving him a 7-year, $62 million deal? But Tepper wanted to look so much smarter than all his other fellow NFL owners. Is he going to do that again and step on a banana peel?
Yeah, God, I hope not, because that impacts Panthers fans. But there's another side of me that says, yeah, I kind of hope he does. Boy, speaking of arrogance, Dan Snyder, the embattled Commanders owner, reportedly has told his attorneys to dig up dirt on Commissioner Goodell and some of his fellow owners. His camp denies this, although an ESPN report is basically saying, Snyder says, he's got dirt on Goodell and some of these owners, and he'll blow it up if he has to. He's such a wonderful man, isn't he? And he and the NFL owners can put an end to Snyder by voting him out, yet have been silent, and maybe now we're getting a better picture as to why. I mean, the good old boy club continues, but if this story is true, I think this might prevent Daniel Snyder from being kicked out of the league. Where do you think this ends up?
Daniel Snyder says he has dirt on these owners, or some owners hired private investigators reportedly to look into NFL owners and team executives. So does he have something? If you want to get conspiratorial, I mean, look at what happened with the emails that were released that were going to Bruce Allen and that were from John Gruden, and that cost John Gruden his head coaching job with the Raiders. I mean, was that a shot across the bow by Dan Snyder? Has not been connected to this, but and some people think it was Roger Goodell who released these emails, but maybe Dan Snyder. Again, this is my theory. I'm getting conspiratorial here. I'm not saying Dan Snyder did this, but maybe that was kind of a sample of what Snyder is threatening that he could do to his fellow NFL owners if they try to vote him out. Now, the other possibility is that maybe Snyder hasn't found anything. Is he bluffing? Are owners willing to take that chance and say, yeah, whatever, we don't think you have anything, we're going to try and vote you out? So 24 of 32 owners are required to approve voting Snyder out as the owner. But this might ultimately come down to money, as all things do, right? There have been rumblings that Daniel Snyder has been withholding revenues from NFL teams, visiting teams, other owners. He's had difficulty building a new stadium in Washington, D.C. or Virginia, Maryland, whichever area is willing to give him land. And if the other owners think that is costing them money, that the Commanders are not worth what they could be, and they're not generating the revenue they could be because FedEx Field right now is so poorly run and in such bad condition, and attendance is down, and the fans are staying away, then I think that's what the NFL owners will use to justify pushing Snyder out despite these threats.
I love the quote one owner gave when Snyder said, all the owners hate each other. He said, it's like the mafia. And this veteran NFL owner said, that's not true. All the owners hate Daniel Snyder. I was like, whoa, man, it's game on. We'll see how this one plays out. We'll be on top of this story moving forward for sure. As Ian Castleberry joins the Wise Guys on the D.C. Creasman Jewelers Wise Lines, our NFL Gold Nuggets presented by D.C. and his staff at 269 Tunnel Road, your one-stop jewelry shop. Ian, what did you make of Commanders coach Ron Rivera? I'm stunned by this. Called out Carson Wentz as the main reason the team is buried in last place in the NFC East. He has since apologized to Wentz, but in my opinion, man, the damage has been done.
Oh, I agree. That was a rare admission, really, or as you said, throwing a player under the bus by an NFL coach. Yeah, that did not reflect well on Ron Rivera, certainly not on Carson Wentz. No. Maybe that points somewhat to what we saw last year where the Colts, that the coaching staff, some players, and that Robert Irsay, the owner, couldn't wait to get rid of Carson Wentz because they didn't think he was a leader. He wasn't playing well. So is this an extension of that? Ron Rivera feeling the same way? Also, maybe this was a shot at Dan Snyder because in that long ESPN article that we just referred to, it was mentioned that Snyder was the one who pushed for trading for Carson Wentz, that it wasn't necessarily a decision that Ron Rivera wanted to make. So maybe that was also Rivera saying, hey, man, I didn't make this choice. It's ownership's problem. Look at them. Although, he didn't say that, but he just tersely said quarterback. But I think, I think it's a sign that that was some cracks showing for Ron Rivera, that this isn't going well, and maybe he's losing control a little bit.
Yeah, it seems that way. Here we go, another owner, right? Like Dan Snyder pushing, look, and these NFL owners, I just wonder, why they don't understand running a football team is way different from running your hedge fund. And, they need to buy the team, hire the right people, and get out of the way, like many owners have done over the years. But I think these new owners that come in, there's just a different attitude. There's a big ego, and, they want to win, and they want to win immediately. And some of them will even tattle on their fellow owners, just like Dan Snyder doing there. And it's just weird what's going on right now with all of this in the NFL. Oh, by the way, Ian, I wanted to get your thoughts on, it looks like Raiders receiver Davante Adams could see the inside of a courtroom for shoving a cameraman to the ground after Vegas has lost to the Chiefs.
Yeah, after the Raiders lost, blowing, I believe, a 17-point lead to the Chiefs on Monday Night Football, Adams, who scored what looked like the go-ahead, maybe the winning touchdown, was coming off the field, and a freelance photographer kind of stepped in his way, and Adams shoved him to the ground, and it was kind of a troublesome video. He really shoved him hard, and the guy fell down, and usually you see something like, that photographer should press charges, and maybe something happens, but more often than not, nothing really happens. But this photographer did file charges in Kansas City, and Adams is being charged with misdemeanor assault. The photographer said he suffered whiplash, a headache, and possibly a minor concussion from being shoved and falling to the ground. So this, Adams, he'll probably face a fine. He'll have to appear in court, as you mentioned. It's possible he could face jail time, but I mean, I don't think any of us think that will actually happen. But I mean, I think this is kind of a good thing that finally someone is holding a professional athlete or a celebrity, if you will, for their behavior. That just because they're on the football field or coming off and just things didn't go their way, that they can't necessarily act that way. This was not, an activist running onto the field like we talked about last week and getting tackled by Bobby Wagner. This guy was very much in his workspace. He was doing his job, and Adams essentially attacked him.
Yeah, I mean, if you've seen the video, exactly. I mean, that photographer has just as much right being on the field, and these guys do this all the time. He was a freelancer, yes, with ESPN. And, for Davante Adams in his statement, I just remember reading it. It's kind of like, I'm sorry, but, here we go again. I was emotional, that type of thing. Well, a lot of players are emotional after a tough loss and the camera's shoved in their face. They just keep on jogging or walking and just ignore that. And, Davante Adams, we'll see how this one plays out. Buddy, before we let you go, Thursday Night Football, it's a snoozer, man. All right, let's get to it. And we just had the Commanders discussion. Washington is at Chicago. It's so funny hearing all of the over-unders at 37 or something like that. Like they would score 17 points each. It's just crazy. I'm hoping Amazon can still work on this streaming issue. Fans are still not happy with this, as we've talked about before. But anyway, this game alone, who do you got? You got Chicago at home?
I believe so. It's a pick-em, but it will certainly be intriguing to see how Carson Wentz plays after being called out by Ron Rivera. But that could lead to him playing badly, actually. And I think Washington's defense is really bad against the pass. So Justin Fields, I think, could have a good game here. I do think that Chicago will win at home. I don't know, maybe 16-13 or 16-12. What could be the most compelling thing is last week, after that debacle between the Colts and the Broncos, even Al Michaels seemed to be losing it a little bit, commenting on the quality of the game. So I think this broadcast, if nobody has trouble with the stream, could be worth watching just to see if Al Michaels just has his face in his hands throughout the entire broadcast, and he and Kirk Herbstreit end up kind of yucking it up over what is a second consecutive terrible matchup for Thursday Night Football.
Dude, I know. Now, weren't you and I talking about this last week? Or rather, Amazon, it averages out to $78 million a game that they're paying. I mean, and you're giving them crap matchups like this. How are they supposed to recoup that money if you're not giving them good games to broadcast? Last week's game was really good, but every once in a while you hit that clunker. And that's always been my problem with Thursday Night Football. They've gotten better at it, but it's almost like they just I will just put these two crappy teams together, and it's football. People will watch. Well, we'll see how it plays out tonight. Hey, buddy, appreciate you. Can't thank you enough as always, Ian. Enjoy the rest of the week.
Okay, thanks, Pat. Please take care.
I will. Thank you, buddy. I appreciate that. That's Ian Castleberry with the Wise Guys, one of the good ones right there.